Welcome back from that short break. We are talking GDP growth. This is Econo Chat. Let's talk business with Mr. Daniel Steinman and myself, Elsie Bitimiani, on your power station Energy 100. GDP Deflator. Can you please explain this to the listeners and, of course, to myself as well, because we need to understand what it is all about. We see it, we hear about it, but we need to understand what it is all about.
Elsie, how do you want me to make GDP deflator clear when the statistics agency doesn't understand it?
Ooh. But you're the mastermind.
Did we say that?
You are our lecturer. I will not comment on that statement that you just made, but you are our lecturer when it comes to the economy or economics. So please do.
Okay. As always, let's pull the pieces of the cord apart. Let's split this rope so that we can see how it is put together.
Okay.
When you calculate GDP, you are calculating the bigger turnover of this year compared to the smaller turnover of last year. That's why we talk about GDP growth. We want to quantify to what extent the economy has become bigger year to year. Not now as in the previous part of our talk, 3-year period or 2-year period, just the normal conventional standard flavor GDP year on year on year on year. But it is not a very easy calculation.
Okay.
And the reason is you are trying to calculate an overall value of a highly complex system. And that is a national economy. Now, you can imagine the Namibian economy is relatively small. But, and I always tell the students, visualize this in your mind in a concrete fashion. If you go to Buitepos and you look at the number of trucks. Now remember, there are 33 tons of cargo on each of those trucks. And there is at any point 15, 16, 17, 18 of them at the border post. And they are all being cleared, and they come in all the time. 24/7 for as long as Buitepos is open.
Yeah.
And this is just from Botswana and South Africa, Zimbabwe. That's the traffic that comes through Buitepos. Now you go to the Angolan border. There you will find 30, 40, 50 trucks. 3 times more than at Buitepos. And you go down to Noordoever or Arnhemsvlei and you just sit there for half an hour and the trucks are just coming through all the time. There aren't that many leaving, but if you're on the road to Buitepos, you always see these Botswana trucks. There's quite a bit of traffic. The point I'm trying to make is every single day there is a couple of thousand transactions entering and leaving Namibia. It's a highly complex system, even in our relatively small economy. How do you calculate that? You see, and this is what people don't realize. You know, they think, it's just sort of abstract. It's not. Make it practical. Think of the number of trucks, or think of the cases of beers sold to a single household in a year, and then you multiply that by a whole city, by 360,000 residents in Windhoek, or by 2.4 million people in Namibia, and you start seeing the immense complexity, or you start appreciating the immense complexity. Now, don't make a mistake. Don't think I'm saying that we are drowning in all this raw data. The systems to keep track of it are all in place, and they're fairly functional. You know, we've come a very long way in the 33 years since independence of refining. First of all, growing our capacity to measure, and then refining the raw data into processed statistics. So now you're asking me, what is a GDP deflator? If you look at the nominal value of all transactions, in other words, the value that the bank will typically give you, you you take that value at face value. Now, I need to clarify what I mean by that. You take every $100 that are reflected in the bigger amounts as a true $100. But as you and I very well know, and as we have been experiencing very painfully since about September last year, inflation is taking a huge cut out of our disposable income.
Yeah.
Two things: rising interest rates, rising inflation. What it means is, with the same money, we can buy less. So that principle you need to apply on to the way that you calculate GDP. So if, let's say, your GDP was 100 last year and it is 100 this year, 110. The example shows that it has grown by 10%, from 100 to 110, but inflation was 7. So you now need to take out the inflation part. You have to remove it from the calculation. What remains? 3%.
Yeah.
And that is the actual growth. That is what we call real growth.
Okay.
So real growth is what you get after you subtract inflation from nominal growth. The value of the transactions at bank level. That's nominal growth. GDP deflator, you have basically two popular ways of calculating GDP. The one is called the CPI method, where you use the consumer price index.
Yeah.
In other words, fairly straightforward inflation. You look at the GDP nominal growth, and you see we've gone from 197 billion to 202 billion Namibia dollars. This is now GDP for the whole country. And you see that the statistics agency tells us inflation is about 6.2 or 6.3, and you take it off from there, and you see, real growth will be 3% or 2.9%. That is how the Bank of Namibia get to that figure, which they then publish. GDP deflator does the same thing in a slightly, or using a slightly different formula. There you working with volumes and unit prices. The kicker here is that from the two different ways of calculating GDP, do you know what happens? You don't get the same answer. You get two different answers. Sometimes the answers can vary quite a lot, or sometimes they're very close. If they're very close, you're very lucky. You say thank you. If they are very far apart, as has happened with the statistics agency in the past, then they publish this nonsense figure of a GDP deflator of 18. Let's say the economy has grown nominally by 10%, and the GDP deflator, the answer that they get from applying the formula, gives you the value of 18. Take it away, it means that you were in recession, which you were not, because the GDP deflator was calculated incorrectly. But that's not very important. That is just something that happened. I'm fairly certain they don't make that type of mistake anymore. So it's just two different ways of calculating GDP. And you always try and get the answer. The one is sort of like a control for the other one. And the closer they are, the more reliable your eventual values are.
All right, Mr. Daniel Steinman, thank you so much for that clarity, and also thank you for always educating us. We have unfortunately come to the end of this talk today. Of course, we'll be back next week, but in case you've missed out, you can of course go to economist.com.na. That is the website where you can also get your daily updates on what is happening in the country in terms of the economy, but also business related news and updates. And then, of course, you can also go to the YouTube channel that is Economist NAM. You can just tap in and listen to all our conversations that we've had. Thank you so much to our listeners for always being 100 connected to the Power Station Energy 100. And of course, like I said, we will be back next week.